Mark loves to plant, and one day while tending to his flower bed, he found a shiny, odd-looking coin. He noticed original writing and pictures on it. It suggested that it may have a fascinating history when he examined it more closely. When the expert viewed the coin, his eyes opened and he stammered, "This can't be true." Mark had asked for an expert with extensive understanding of historical things. Mark was still fixated on the coin he had discovered some hours before. He had never seen anything like this before by this point, and he found nothing at all when he began looking online. Mark made the decision to let his find rest for the time being. The weekend was still a few days away, so he decided to attempt to visit some antique stores after putting the coin in his safe. When Mark heard some odd noises coming from his yard in the middle of the night, he sprang out of bed. Someone seems to be digging. When Mark's flashlight was pointed at someone in his yard, that individual glanced up in utter horror. The ground was a mess, and the majority of his roses had been thrown aside. The man began to flee when he yelled at him, demanding an explanation. Fortunately for him, a few other people were still on the streets, even though the man was quicker than Mark. Mark began to yell that the individual who had damaged his property needed to be stopped. They made the decision to seize the individual who had ruined his flowers. After some effort, the man came to the realization that he was unable to escape. "Why the hell was he digging up my flower bed?" Mark insisted. Then Mark saw the man was not a day older than 16 and more like a youngster. He was pleading for pardon and appeared as terrified as possible. "I was just following orders," he stated. "What was this boy talking about?" Mark pondered. Mark assured him that if he agreed to cooperate and not flee, he would neither harm him or file charges. The two guys released the youngster when he consented. Mark requested the child to explain everything as they sat down on a bench. The child began telling Mark that he lived in the city's lowest area and that a wealthy-looking man had stopped by this evening to ask if anyone would want to work for him. The youngster was unable to refuse as he was giving a respectable amount of money. The guy had just instructed him to dig up the rose bed at this place. The child was to get in touch with him again if he discovered any coins there. If not, he would simply mail the money to him. The answer seemed obvious. The expert, to whom Mark had disclosed that he had discovered the coin in his flower bed, had first expressed curiosity but ultimately declined to assist him. The individual who assigned the task to the youngster had to be this one. Mark started looking for this enigmatic specialist by reaching out to his network of friends and acquaintances. Several names kept coming up as well-known local collectors and historians. The most were unremarkable, but one in particular caught Mark's attention: Dr. Samuel Bennett, whom he faintly recalled from their phone conversation. Mark discovered something fascinating after doing further research. Dr. Bennett was connected to the most prominent history museum in the city. He had an epiphany. Might the coin be connected to the museum itself? Mark made up his mind. He would go straight to Dr. Bennett. When he was well-dressed the following day, he carried the currency in a little velvet purse. His head whirled with ideas. Tension was evident as their eyes locked. Mark said, "Dr. Bennett," in an accusing tone, "we need to talk." The specialist seemed trapped and hesitated. "Mr. Mark, isn't it?" he answered quite casually. "What you're talking about is unclear to me. I talk to a lot of individuals on a lot of different topics. Have you visited to see our most recent exhibit?" Mark became impatient. "Avoid playing tricks on me. You are well aware of what I am referring to." Mark's resolve was only strengthened by Dr. Bennett's evasiveness. Taking a deep breath, Mark explained the sequence of events: the boy's invasion of his garden, the surprise phone call, and the curiosity in the coin. Dr. Bennett's expression tightened with every detail, showing his uneasiness. "How can you explain this?" At last, Mark made a demand. The evidence was too overwhelming. Dr. Bennett's shoulders slumped as he sighed. "All right," he said in agreement. "I may know more than I have let on, but it's not what you think." Mark readied himself for an admission of guilt. He was taken aback by Dr. Bennett instead. He said, How about a collaboration? Your discovery, my expertise. Together we might unravel a mystery bigger than either of us imagined. Mark was surprised. With mistrust in his voice, he questioned, "Why should I trust you?" Dr. Bennett said, "Because, Mark, while our introductions may have been less than ideal, our goals are aligned." As Mark thought about the offer, the background hum of the museum subsided. Mark held out a wary hand. "Okay, Dr. Bennett, we work together. However, our agreement is terminated at the slightest hint of dishonesty." Aware that somewhere amid these pages lay the secret to the coin's history, they set off on their quest together. They discovered texts with coded languages, maps with mysterious symbols, and hints that gave just a partial image. Every artwork alluded to different locations throughout the city that pleaded to be visited. Throughout the city, word of their treasure quest spread like wildfire. Intrigued by this fusion of contemporary action and old legend, reporters started following them around. Mark's fingers touched a leather-bound document that was centuries old, among a stack of ancient books in the city's historical library. It described an incident in which the city's aristocracy buried a treasure trove to keep intruders out. Is there a connection between this and the treasure? Slowly, the medallion's mystery started to come apart, its fragments combining with the manuscript and other hints to guide them to their next location. They were directed to a deteriorated statue in an abandoned garden using their updated leads. There was another penny in Mark's fingers, tucked up in its base. In addition to symbolizing a fragment of the city's mysterious history, each coin increased awareness of their search. Mark sought to talk to Dr. Bennett about the possible history of the second coin while he studied it closely. But the specialist was strangely reticent, reluctant to go further into its history. Mark got evasive answers or sidetracks to every question he asked. Mark, unable to control his annoyance, approached Dr. Bennett. "How come you won't talk about this coin? What are you concealing?" He made a demand. The tension in the air increased. While Dr. Bennett angrily defended his own reasons, Mark questioned the expert's genuine motivations. They took a minute to think, admitted their own concerns, and pledged to communicate honestly. They made the decision to move forward with a fresh feeling of collaboration. Through neighborhoods, buildings, and sites that repeated stories from ancient epics, they were guided by oral histories, fading maps, and ancient records. During their hunt, they came upon Miss Loretta, a local historian who was familiar with the city's underground system. "Seek the vault beneath the old council building," she said. Mark and Dr. Bennett were intrigued and ready to explore the city's underground core in the hopes of discovering its mysteries. Mark cast a sidelong glance toward Dr. Bennett, and his suspicions about the historian's intentions returned. When they were in danger of being discovered, could he really trust the guy by his side? The vault squeaked open, displaying piles upon stacks of dusty books, faded photos, and yellowed paperwork instead of the gleam of gems or the glitter of wealth. After a brief period of disappointment, both men realized they had discovered a wealth of historical relics, each of which may reveal secrets about the past. Mark's fingertips grazed a metal disc as he dug through the treasure. He took it out and found another coin. This one, in contrast to the others, was elaborately carved with inscriptions and symbols that were unfamiliar to him. "No more secrets," Mark said, presenting Dr. Bennett with the coin. "You knew something like this was here, didn't you?" At last, Bennett gave a nod. The moment for revelations had undoubtedly arrived, but he had intended to shield Mark from some realities. Dr. Bennett reluctantly started his narration, exposing the sinister past of the currency. It was a symbol from clandestine activities during the difficult Cold War era, not merely a relic. He clarified that agents utilized these special coins for communication and identification. As Mark looked through his land's old documents and property records, his hand shook. As it happened, his present home had originally belonged to a well-known Cold War strategist. Dr. Bennett went in further detail on the special function of these coins. They were more than just money or symbols of affluence. Rather, they were secretly transferred between agents as payment and identification verification. Their elaborate patterns were not only works of art, they were meticulously constructed codes that were recognizable to agents, yet appeared normal to everyone else. Although Mark was thrilled to have discovered such a significant piece of history, he was also aware of the risk. The two discussed their next course of action over strong coffee mugs, declaring, "This is bigger than both of us," Mark acknowledged. Despite his initial misgivings, Dr. Bennett consented. They came to see that history, with all of its mysteries and complexities, should be known. They were adamant about bringing attention to this long-hidden aspect of the Cold War. They put in many hours to produce an extensive study that covered the coins, their provenance, and the larger historical background. They planned a press conference because they were excited to tell the world about their significant discoveries. The news spread quickly. Mark and Dr. Bennett's incredible finding was reported by every major news outlet, including major newspapers and television stations. Mark looked at Dr. Bennett in the midst of a sea of microphones and the brightness of camera flashes. Although their voyage had been tense and full of mistrust, hardship had strengthened their relationship. They had become partners in discovery after beginning as doubtful strangers. "We did it," Mark said, and the once mysterious specialist nodded in agreement. The coins and historical records were now permanently housed in the museum, where their journey had taken a major turn. The audience was able to immerse themselves in the mystery of the past, thanks to a specially prepared show. As the sun started to set, Mark and Dr. Bennett said their final goodbyes outside the museum. Their once closely connected trajectories were now taking them in separate ways,